Hey y'all, producer Drew here. Jackie's back with an absolutely phenomenal guest. Henri is an artist and photographer featured in the CMA's current exhibition, Rendez-Vous, on view through January 21st. Throughout this episode, you will get an inside view into her artistic process and an intimate portrait of her experience working with her friend, fashion designer Alexander McQueen. The stories On shares are heartfelt and thoughtful, and I hope you'll be as touched to listen to it as we were when we recorded it. So, with that, please enjoy a conversation between Jackie Adams and Henri.
Welcome to Binder. I'm Jackie Adams. Welcome to our listeners who are tuning in to today's podcast. We are really fortunate and very grateful to have Henri with us today. We're going to talk a little bit about who Henri is because she is one of the artists in the exhibition Rendez-Vous. We are doing this interview. I'm in Columbia, South Carolina in the United States, but you are in Paris, France. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to have this conversation with you, Jackie.
Thank you. I thought we could really start from a place where listeners get to know you a little bit. How did you begin your artistic path up to where you are today, going back to the beginnings?
The beginning, where do we begin? That's a very good question indeed. I guess I've been artistic in a way or another since my childhood, so it's really very inside me. Professionally, I started with photography and film, which is the image, still movement in 95. I've been doing that mainly for a very long time. And I started recently, which is 4 years ago, to materialize compositions, tableau, if you want, mainly collage, using all kinds of materials. I had that in mind, and I had lots of sketches and drawings and esquisses for almost 2 decades, and always busy with photography, I have to say, publishing books, making exhibitions. And funnily enough, before the confinement, the first confinement in Paris for COVID, I decided to lock myself in 2019, in October. And I said, for 4 months, I'm going to work exclusively on my compositions. And then what happened. So I just kept working during the first confinement. So it's been a very intense 9 months time where it was really a very in-depth beginning with that new medium for me, which were papers, inks, oil, all kinds of materials, really. So photography since 95, composition since 2019. And meanwhile, what very few people know is that I've been writing too since my early 20s. So I have essays, novels, poems, all kinds of things, which I intend to publish at some point, but it's not done yet. That's where I stand right now.
Yes. And we're going to dive in a little bit on some of that various different mediums that you've worked with, because it's impressive to see all the different processes that you are now creative with. And you mentioned a word several times that I sort of keyed in on, and I think it's really important to highlight about your work and how you see through that work. But the word compositions, and when you think about that word, it comes up in all different art forms. Literature, as you noted in writing, there are compositions there are visual art compositions, there are music compositions, there are dance compositions. And recently we had a visit with you one-on-one in person with one of our Board of Trustees members, Joseph Bruce. And he really came back and shared a very wonderful observation with me. He said that you have this ability to capture the creator as much as their art form and the creative process itself. And you're doing it from behind the scenes in rehearsals all the way through to the public performance aspect. I'm really fascinated with this, and I'm wondering, what is unfolding for you when you find yourself in those moments throughout those stages of following the performance art realm? And why are you so attracted to it?
I have a passion for human beings first. As simple as it seems, it's something very strong. It's always the human factor that turns me on. And I love also the process, the making of things, the different steps. I was lucky enough to live in Japan 20 years ago, 25 years. Time is flying. It was really a foundation in my approach of art and life, the fact that art had to be in life and that art and craft are not so separated in the Japanese culture. And that really talks to me very much. It's very linked to Lee McQueen also, because he was using a lot of craft and techniques and embroidery and exploring all sorts of things. And he was also, I think I can say that, fascinated by what human hands can do. It's very tangible. It's very present. So for performing arts, the dancers use their bodies, the musicians will use their arms, whatever it is, the conductor or the musicians. There is something very connected between the human being and the instrument, even if the instrument is the body. And I find a source observation in all this, which is really fascinating because it's very touching. You have attempts, you have difficulties, you have failures. And I am lucky enough to observe all that. And also you have very fugitive, very fleeting moments of magic in that. For instance, at the Paris Opera, I noticed that very often the last rehearsal at the end of the day is when there is a form of abandon, meaning the dancers are very much in control of themselves, very often observing themselves in the mirror. They are very tough with their level of excellence. They are very demanding with themselves. But at the end of the day, the fatigue and the exhaustion leads them to something very interior because maybe the body is more tired. And very often I did my best photographs in the last 30 minutes of the day with dancers during the rehearsal process. And when you observe at McQueen, we'll come back on that, there was something very fascinating in the preparation of the shows as well. It was a hard work. It was working. It was not champagne and petit four and dancing, not at all. It was focusing, working until the last minute. And as you know, in every human process, you can have accidents, and you would have accidents happening, things which were not really finished or something happening special. I will give you a few stories about it, but Lee would embrace it. And I do that, for instance, when I do my compositions, when the materials are driving you in a way and something is not happening exactly as you thought it would happen. And you think, okay, I'm going to use this and I'm going to do something with this. So there is something very spontaneous in a process, which is wonderful to observe too. All these observations, the main component is trust, meaning you spend a lot of time with people and they accept you fully. And at some point, you are part of this human entity and they don't see you anymore. That's when you can see fully because you're adopted. It's like taming each other, like wild animals, and we are in presence. And there is this funny anecdote with Lee when I started working with him. It was early 97. They asked me at Givenchy to follow him for 2 weeks when he was creating his first couture collection for Givenchy. And Lee was a very shy person, and so was I. I can speak now, but I was really very discreet, but very focused on doing my work. And at some point, he came to me and he said, I've been observing you. You're observing everything. And we laughed. And that was really sweet. And it's true, I was observing everything. And there was a lot to see in the Givenchy atelier with this young English boy, the cultural shock, and all his ideas and his fantastic talent in doing what he was doing. But still, he was not missing anything. He was observing everything and everybody, including me. And I thought that was really sweet and funny. Like really, to come back to this idea, like animals, observing each other, but keeping a distance, getting closer. That's why I use this word taming. Basically, back to my work, if I want to be systematic, you have three main body of works and involvements, which have been Lee McQueen, obviously, which have been the dancers and Paris Opera, not only, but mainly. And you have the portraits of artists very often, most often, but and the art of portraits. It's something very difficult and exciting and interesting, and I will never stop doing portraits, I guess.
And to go back to the idea of spontaneity that you talked about, as I've gotten to learn more about the different creators in the show, whether it's Simon Ungles, yourself, Lee McQueen, there is this common thread of what it meant to hold spontaneity in everybody's role in those moments. Like you had to be that photographer in a moment where spontaneity had to be infused in your process. Lee McQueen brought that through his craft and his process. Simon Ungles and the way that he printed the material. Everybody kind of held central this notion of spontaneity and what it meant. And there's a great connection there between all of those different creators in this bigger whole of what that era was. And this also this idea of trust that you talk about, because your photography expresses very, very rich visual storytelling. And you can see the empathy, you can see the intention, you can see the trust that has evolved over time, that has come out of those moments, like you said, of being discreet, observing, and working around each other. And even the dance that's created in those moments, it's an analogy, it's parallel to the dance that you see on the stage. There's very much a dance that's happening with those visual creators as well. So I wonder, exploring kind of these ideas a little bit further, what propels you to capture the moment as a photographer when you decide, I'm going to press that shutter? It's the aha moment. When are you starting to make those decisions?
How shall I put this? It's basically I put myself in a state of receiving. All the process is human or creative. Sylvie Guillem said it once. I was asking her, what are you thinking of when you take a bow at the end of the performance? Are you thinking of, I need to buy the bread? Or are you thinking, I've been amazing? Or are you thinking, I missed this one, I could have done better? What do you have in mind? And she said, it's like full of light, and it's very simple. What I have in mind every time is giving and receiving. I think that's beautiful, because when you imagine Sylvie Guillem on the edge of a stage, you have the so-called fourth wall, the audience, and she's really on the edge at the limit, and you have this communication, giving and receiving. So back to my practice of photography, it's like if I was opening wide like a book, and I'm this book with all these white pages. It's a state of vulnerability. You can print me, impress me with anything you want. I'm there, I'm offered, I'm ready to receive anything. Dreams, nightmares, hopes, anxiety. I will absorb everything. I will try to understand. That's the empathy. Thank you for saying it. It's a key word. I will try to understand what the person in front of me is feeling, whether it's Lee McQueen 15 minutes before his show, or whether it's a dancer repeating a movement 15 times, which is not uncommon. And I really try to feel, and I hope I can understand what the person feels. And then I'm looking for, that's the difficult thing to name, because it's the unspeakable. It's just a crack up. It's just something very tiny, very fugitive. It's interstitial. It's beautiful and it's true. There is no artifice. There is something important for any reason. And there is also a full honesty of the person in front of me. And I try to capture this. Yesterday, I had a conversation with a wonderful curator, and he mentioned Marcel Duchamp and the inframince, which would be the ultra thin. I don't know how you say this concept. And it's exactly that. It's something absolutely tiny. When I feel it, I have to capture it, because if I wait 2 minutes for any reason, have a glass of water, it's gone. Lee was saying that in another context. It's there, it's gone. It's exactly like that in photography. So you have to be 300% focused and in favor of. Or if you want a parallel, there is this sentence, I used to know it by heart, from The Great Gatsby at the beginning of the novel, where the narrator is describing Gatsby's smile. And he says something like that. He was embracing the entire world to focus on you with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It's exactly that. It's like gathering the context, the element, your understanding, the information you had, the briefing you had 2 days ago, compiling all this information, and then embracing the situation with really a prejudice in favor of the person who is in front of me.
I have to say, I am always in awe of photographers like yourself, because there is so much going on in a moment like those that you've experienced, and you really have to get into a state of mind, a state of being, because when the moment is gone, it is really gone. And so when you have a job to do as well, you know that you have to get a moment. That your job is to capture this. And so you have to really learn how to navigate like so much going on around you. And I'm always interested to know how photographers like yourself do that. How do they center themselves? And what is their process for that giving and receiving of all of that information?
I think also you have unconsciously those thousands of pictures that you took, they work for you. What I mean is that if you take a picture, for instance, it's easy to imagine this one, a McQueen picture, which I took in a very sad moment, of course, which was March 2010. I did these pictures in a state of mind, state of being, which was honestly terrible. I didn't want to photograph that day. It's Sarah Burton who told me I didn't have to finish the circle and Lee would love you to be there. So I came. But my first reaction was, no, I can't. We were all devastated, as you can imagine. And the last thing I wanted to do was to document the grief in a way. This presentation with the 16 last outfits, it was really one of the most difficult moments of my life, honestly. But then I came and I took these photographs. It was still analog, because I'd done only analog photography for Libby. That was making so much sense, relating to craft and excellence and the beauty of things. I love that analog photography. For me, it's unique. And so I took these photographs in March 2010. I looked at the contact sheets, and on many, many images, and I swear I was unaware of it, you could see a cross from a piece of wood in the background, from a shadow. I put crosses in. It still gives me goosebumps because I was not aware of it. So it's a bit tough to tell this anecdote, but it gives you the exact example of what I mean when I say your mind is working in a strange way. Things happen and you have your memory and your unconsciousness, which is still working with you, and all the photographs you've taken before are there with you. It's like a coat. Yeah, and you have to trust yourself. It took me a while. When you're a beginner, it's difficult to trust yourself to that extent. I am capable of. I'm in front of Lee McQueen for the number 13 show, and you have the ink on Shalom, and I am able to capture this. You have to trust yourself. And it took me a while to think that way. Okay, let's do it. I can do it.
I'm so glad you said that, because when we were talking about trust, that was also going in my mind as well. Like, how did you develop trust in yourself to take those moments? I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, it's also the giving and receiving, which is so important, which is that from time to time, some people express the fact that they were really touched by one of your photographs. That's encouraging. That's another process. It's also, it gives you confidence, and this confidence is useful for the next photograph you're going to take.
You know, the exhibition, as I work on it and hearing everything that you're saying and things that I'm reading and hearing from people, the exhibition is sort of taking on more than just an artistic form. For me, it's also moving into the spiritual realm. So, but we'll get into that here in just a few minutes.
I hope it's not too conceptual, but I have to say that I have very, two things are important in my practice. First, I have a very funny relationship to time. I have a very deep and constant feeling of the end, the fact that a life has a beginning, a life, and an ending. And I have this thought every day, and therefore it gives me something else, which is the extreme awareness of the ephemeral when something special happens, be it in the studio at the Paris Opera or with McQueen. And to McQueen, it's really important because it seems easy to say now, but if you put yourself in the situation, we're in the late 90s, we're all young, very spontaneous, enjoying what we're doing. It's very fresh, it's very natural, and nobody will scream, wow, that's a miracle, it's Lee McQueen who has done it. No, it was not like that. He had already his talent or his genius, whatever you want to call it, but it was very natural, wonderfully natural. Even if I was struck the first time I saw him take a roll of fabric at Givenchy and create like a piece of art in 3D on the body of the model, that was astonishing immediately. I perfectly remember that. But still, it was very full of lightness, if you want. And in spite of that, I had very quickly, probably the first year, this feeling that there was this misunderstanding, everybody calling him a fashion designer, and for me, he was much more than that. He was an artist. And everybody liked being in the fashion process. Like, that's a season show, then it's gone, then there will be another one. And for me, it was phenomenal. It was major. So in my mind, it was like, I'm here, I have a camera, nobody realized it. This is insane. This is more than important, and I have to capture this. Like a duty, almost. Yeah. If I don't capture it now, as we said, it will be gone. And nobody seems to realize that it's not just another fashion show, it's beyond. And I had awareness from the beginning. So I was doing my work in that spirit. The very first year, I felt misunderstood. That's so usual for an artist, but like people calling me a backstage photographer, for instance. I've never been a backstage photographer. I was there for Lee McQueen as I would be there for a dancer or a conductor. I was there for the artist. For me, he was an artist. So there was always this passion there, and for me, he was beyond that. This backstage photographer, and all this was too restrictive. For me, what was happening in front of my eyes was much, much bigger.
I think that's what makes, for me, the exhibition that much more special, is because you had that foresight at the time and the deep understanding and the deep awareness that this is more than just fashion. And capturing that was so important at the time. And so having the exhibition now as a result of that kind of work that you did and that awareness that you owned and took on, even though maybe other people didn't recognize it as easily in the moment, is really quite beautiful and really quite special about this exhibition. And I think it truly does come across.
Thank you. Thank you. And also I have to say that that's the advantage when you're somebody, I was in and out. Even if my relationship was very close and very intense with Lee, I was not there all the time. So that gives you a freshness to see things. You see what I mean? Everybody around, they had a job to do. Whatever it is, showing something, organizing the show, the press, whatever. And it was a continuous flow of responsibilities. Whereas me, I was going back, doing other projects, coming back. And so it was very striking for me.
Did you feel as though you were sort of creating a narrative and a story and you just didn't know where it was going to go? Like the book was being written, and like you could tell there was a narrative coming about?
I don't like to talk in the name of Lee. That's why I'm very careful. That's why very often I like to refer to quotes from him, because that's a fact, that's the truth. And it's not my view, because my understanding is the best it can be, but it's only my words. When I refer to him, for instance, fashion is crap, that's his word. So it's not mine, and it's important. Or fashion is just a medium. He said that. It says it all. So I always like to come back as much as possible to Lee. About the narrative and the story, that's my interpretation. I think Lee knew what he wanted from me before I knew it, far before me. Because retrospectively, I had 13 years since he passed away to think about it. Because again, it was very natural. So we met. The story you may have read, it was so cute. He had no money, saying, I love your photographs. He said, but I can pay you. Is it okay if you give me photographs, I give you clothes? I said, okay, that's fine. And it never changed. Believe it or not, our relationship stayed the same. So I was coming, I was doing my work, always in analog, then going to my other projects, and then back. I never thought it would stop. For some reason, I can't explain that. To me, it was a rendezvous. So I had this rendezvous with Lee, and super happy to have it. And it was a lot of rendezvous when he was at Givenchy, and I was doing McQueen also. So it was 4 times a year. So it was very frequent, and I enjoyed it. These 4 years were very, very intense. I was living in London. My son was a baby, and the nursery was literally 20 meters from the atelier. And he loved kids, so he was saying, always come with your baby. So I would see Lee every week. So it was something, but it was in my life, really. It was very simple. And so we never had any contracts. So it was just friendship and trust until the end. I never had any contract with him.
Usually those make for the most authentic experiences in our relationship. It's the ones that just naturally build upon themselves, and they don't come with any formality. You don't need the formality to define.
No, absolutely. And that's why, thinking about it after he left us, I was like, there's no way that such a brilliant and clever man could have me by his side without contract for 13 years, without knowing, without having an intention. He formalized it, and that's his words. The last long conversation we had was in 2009. It was in London, and he said that to me. This word became kind of famous, but it was so simple still. He said, you have my life in pictures, and I wanted it that way because I trust you. As simple as that. Imagine, because I truly didn't realize how famous he was, because he was still grounded. Our relationship didn't change. I would arrive the day of the show, he would hug me and show me the collection. I was doing my work. I knew he was doing well and was more famous, but it's only after his death that I realized that he had become a star and all that, because I don't care. That's not what drives me in my relationship with people or artists. It's who they are. It's not the noise around them. So yes, I think Lee had, when exactly I can tell, but quite quickly had the idea that I would be in charge of his life in pictures. But I didn't know it. I was just going to my rendezvous and...
That's really beautiful. It's really beautiful to hear you speak about it. And I'm wondering, through some of those moments as you sort of illustrate who this person was for our audience, what were some of your fondest memories working with him? What sort of sticks out to you?
The good memories are all linked to his strong sense of humor. And I enjoy to say that because there has been so much myth about the dark side of Lee, and he was not a macabre person. He was an incredible artist, so he had, of course, his darkness and his light. I mean, it's like music. You don't have music without silence. To me, it's exactly the same. all passionate artists have their dark moments, but he really had bright moments. We laughed a lot. He had a very strong sense of humor. He was making jokes. So it was very joyful. And also he was carrying everybody up with him. It was really uplifting. Sean Lynn said it. Philip Tracy said it. We can all say it. He was pushing us in the most wonderful way. And I think we can all, and Sarah, of course, too, and we can all say we wouldn't be the person we are without him. We know what we owe him. And it was really fun and exciting. One of the most poetic and beautiful moments about the accidents, about the work, is for Sarah Bond. I love that detail. Yeah, you will see. There was a very beautiful dress, a huge gown, and there were some roses embroidered on the dress. Of course, everything was late, so the little hands were sewing the roses at the last minute on the dress, while Lee was putting a spray with the scent of a rose. So when she would walk, you would have the perfume of the rose. So it was screaming and hectic, as you can imagine, backstage. And then Lee said, go, go, go. And so the mother started to walk, and the roses who had been sewed at the last minute starting to fall down on her steps. So you see her at the end of Sarah Bond, and you have all the roses falling down. And Lee was there in front of the monitor, just laughing, saying, this is perfect. The roses are falling. So that's the kind of wonderful memories in work. Personal memories, I don't tell many, but there is one story which I love because it says a lot about him. So I think that's interesting. I said that story to Annabelle Nilsson, who is not with us anymore. Annabelle passed away in 2018, and she was Lee McQueen's soulmate. Needless to say, Annabelle and I became very close after 2010, very, very close. We became soulmates, really. And Annabelle loved that story. It happened at Givenchy at a couture show, and my son was a little one, a baby. He was 13 months old, and something bad happened. I mean, the nanny let him fall down and didn't say anything, so he developed a very bad infection in the bones. It was really awful. I didn't know that. I knew there was something wrong. So I was still living in London. I came to Paris to do my work. And of course, I was more than preoccupied because pediatrician, everybody thought I was a hysterical mother, worrying for nothing. And I was sure there was something serious. So I'm there at Givenchy doing my work, taking photographs, and everybody knew my son. So Amy, who was at the press, Sidonie, everybody was, Sarah, everybody was saying, how is Tristan? Because I would see him very often. And I was saying to everybody, he's fine, which was not the case. And then I'm close to Lee adjusting a garment. We are maybe 45 minutes late. It's full hysteria everywhere. You have to imagine the tension at that moment. Everybody wants the show to start and it's not ready yet. And then Lee asked me, of course, how is your son? How is Tristan? Don't know why I started to cry. I mean, it was one more question and it was too much. So I started to cry, but really crying, and I felt so embarrassed. Lee stopped immediately what he was doing. I mean, you have 25 people watching the scene, okay, waiting for the girl to be ready to start the show. And he took me gently in his arms and asked me what's going on. I said, I'm so sorry. Give me 2 minutes. I will gather myself. I really apologize. And he said, no, Anna, I know you. There is something. What is wrong? And I said, my son is at the hospital. I suspect it's serious. I don't know yet. I'm waiting the results of the exams, but I'm sure it's serious. And I said, now I'm annoying you just before your show, etc. And he was just so wonderful. He said, but Anne, we don't care. This is just a fashion show. That's your son. That's life. That's real life. So he took me again. He dried my tears, took care of me for maybe 5 minutes, which was a lot at this moment, believe me. And I was I already loved him. Really, I loved him very much. But from this moment, it was like, Lee McQueen, you can ask me anything.
We'll be right back. In the beginning of the exhibition, you see those gifted garments, and there is that very personal story that really does deeply humanize who this person was. And really, I think it's important to tell those stories because, he's not with us now. And so as time goes on, and as history goes on and history gets written and developed, things can change and narratives can change. And I think it's so important to hold center who those people were, because it can get so dissolved and it can get so spread thin. It can just start to disappear.
You're so right. It's fascinating because it's been 13 years since he's dead. And you see every day how vigilant you have to be. I talk about my duty in transmitting about Lee McQueen, because things can dilute, exactly as you said, very quickly. You say something and it's cut or a bit changed, and then 2 or 3 years later, it doesn't sound the same. So you have constantly to come back and to repeat the same things, the truth. I mean, it's great to celebrate Lee McQueen and his unique works, but I think it's important to do it with dignity and with accuracy. Suzanne Barrett, who is the CEO of Barrett Barrera Projects, has been of key importance in doing my duty of transmission. And Suzanne, and you mentioned Nick and Casper and Kelly, they have such a dedication. They are so respectful and always wanted to be in the truth and being beyond careful. Honestly, it's exceptional. I feel very lucky that I can do my duty with people like Barrett Barrera Projects because they understood everything. Suzanne is a very sensitive person. She is a CEO and she has a vision too, but she understood everything I'm discussing with you. And it's the best that could happen to celebrate Lee.
It's another example of building trust, right? You have this really wonderful story to tell, but it is very personal. It's very much your lived experience. And so there, again, has to come into play empathy, intention, and trust building. Just like what you've practiced throughout your entire career, there is now this new place to develop it. And so you have to do that dance again, right?
Suzanne Barrett did it step by step because our story, that's why when we chose the title Rendez-Vous, to be totally transparent, it was of course about my rendezvous with Lee, but I said to Suzanne, it's also my rendezvous with you, because why did you happen in the global picture? I don't know, but it's Suzanne who contacted me as early as 2012 when I published my first book called Love Looks Not With the Eyes about Lee McQueen. And she said to me, I'm touched by him, maybe not as much as you are, but very deeply. I started this collection of garments. And so we started a very in-depth conversation. Yeah, so it goes that far.
Oh, thank you so much for clarifying and explaining that, because we do get questions quite often about how did this come together? How did these people connect and talk to one another? So thank you so much for sharing that. So I thought it would be a really great experience for our listeners to hear a little bit more about some of the iconic images that are in the show, some of the iconic photographs. And one of the works, Ensancé 2, that was done in 1998, it's a black and white photo, and it features the 90s runway model Shalom Harlow. It's an iconic image that many recognize, whether you are into fashion or not. It's one that has been seen all over the world. Can you share a little bit about this image? I'm also particularly curious about that moment and what the experience was like in the moment.
Okay. So this show was so unique in many ways. I can already tell you that this time I was not the only one aware that it was a historical moment. I think every person who was present understood that this was far beyond a fashion moment. I think everybody felt it, and that the only time I saw Lee crying with joy and a few other people, and I was probably crying too, like exhilarating joy. It was just amazing. Shalom Arlo, the model, used to be a dancer, so she was moving in a very gracious and inspired way. The show number 13 was inspired by the art and craft movement, so the floor was made of raw wood, not varnished nor anything. And in the center of the stage, you had a circle, which has been cut, and Shalom would stand in this circle, and it was like a music box, if you want. So the circle was turning as she started to move her arms very slowly. And on the two sides, right and left, you have these two big industrial machines, and nobody knew exactly what they were doing. To me, they were like two monsters asleep. And Shalom, so graceful in the middle, and this wonderful music, Concerto number 23 by Mozart, the Adagio, so very melancholic and beautiful. And then, as she was still turning like a doll, the two monsters' machines started to move, and they were industrial machines used to paint cars. And they started to spray some ink. One was fluorescent yellow and one was black, which is funny because the picture being black and white, you don't see the yellow, the fluorescent yellow in my photograph. You just see the black, but it was a lot. And it was really, you could read it. It was a performance, obviously. But you could read it in so many ways. It was an attack against a woman, or was it a wider symbol of a human being, or was it industrialization, was it sexual? There were so many angles, and you received that moment with the music and the beauty of Shalom and the ink and everything. It was unbelievable. It was really extraordinary, and everybody was captured by the moment. So at this time, there was not a lot of money, so the backstage was more hectic than ever. I remember after my tears thinking, okay, I have to run backstage and I have to catch Shalom as she comes back. So before the picture that you mentioned, there was another one where you see Shalom coming back with Lee, because it was the end of the show, with his dogs. He loved his dogs. So it's so funny, he's looking down, still very shy, like a boxer. And Shalom is so proud, and you have the ink everywhere. It's just beautiful. And then she's just there in front of me, and I really have to find my way, my small way to her. And I took 2 or 3 pictures, maybe not more than that, of her in that dress. And I was so happy for Lee to capture that moment. We mentioned that the very moment where that's pressure, you can't miss that. There's no way you can miss that moment. And she was like us, I guess, when I took the picture. We were all, I don't know the English word, breathless. You see, like unable to speak, unable to express your feelings, like all in shock together, but in a wonderful way. It was really a moment of eternity. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people knew it.
Yeah, it was quite incredible. I remember the moment myself, seeing it at least when it was televised. Are there other works in the exhibition that in particular sort of resonate with you from a behind the scenes or in the moment?
Let's talk about one which is typically an atelier picture of Lee working on a dress, actually. And this dress, it speaks volumes about his approach of his art, of his fabrication of a garment. Because this dress was made from an ancient Japanese screen from the 19th century that he totally dismantled. So that was the main part of the dress. And you can see some shells too. And the shells, he just picked them on the beach during a walk with his boyfriend. And he loved the shells and he just collected them, thinking, I will do something with it. So you have in his atelier in London, the dress in the making on the stockman, very focused, and I like the delicacy of his fingers on this picture. It's so precise. And it's basically making a dress for a fashion show, so-called fashion show, with a Japanese screen from the 19th century and bee shells he collected on the beach. And that's his magic. It's this word that he would say very often, sky is the limit or nothing is impossible. And you think they are just they were not. That was his way of doing things. Nothing was impossible. We all know that. Like when he called me once when I was doing a lot of pictorialist prints like cyanotypes, aquatints. And it would take 2 or 3 days to do these prints. And he called me on a Monday morning saying, Anne, I want you to do a portrait, my head on a plate, and then you do one of your 19th century prints, and it's for tomorrow morning for the face, for the anniversary issue. And I was like, hello. So I ran to the studio. We did the head on the plate picture, and everybody said, did you use Photoshop this time? Of course not. It was just a piece of black fabric. We made a hole, and you had 4 interns holding the fabric. And the necklace, if I could say so, was a piece of a show, and you could open it and put it around his neck. So it's just craft, just finding a way to do things. Then I had the films developed in Express. Then I ran in my dark room, and I didn't sleep and worked the entire night. And I came the next morning with the aquatint for Lee. That's how things would happen. Or he would say to Sean Mean, you can make it small, make it big. You see, so it was that kind of pushing us. I felt that very often, that when he had a vision, it was not blur at all. It was a super precise vision. And then he would need to find a way to materialize his vision. It's not like I have a vague idea, I think about light and flowers. No, not at all. It's like I see a garment with this Japanese embroidery from the 19th century, and it will be open, and I will follow the line, and we will sew the shells.
And throughout that process, getting to that vision, there's this wonderful space of like experimentation and trying things and creativity. And it sounds like people gave each other the space that they needed to fail, to try things, to push things, to throw things at the wall. It just really sounded like a wonderful environment that made it very conducive to trying all of that.
That's very true. That's very true, because it's so obvious to me that sometimes I forget to say it, but imagine I had entire freedom. I have been never asked for 13 years, can you do this or can you do that? Nothing. So basically I would call Amy Whitten, who is a wonderful friend who was a press officer for many years. And I would call Amy and say, can you brief me? What is the show about? Because that was feeding, the process. So that would happen 2 or 3 days ago. She would say, Anne, this is what I know. Because she never knew exactly what was going to happen, but she would give me as much information as she could. Then I would go to the show, the day of the show, usually in the evening. I would pop in at 1 or 2 p.m. With the first hairdresser and makeup teams when it's still kind of quiet. Then there was this fabulous moment when the garments came in black bags. It was very mysterious that people couldn't see outside when they were taking it out of the truck. Then they would open all the bags and start to install all the garments. And then he would come in quite early in the afternoon, and most often he would take me by the hand and show me the collection and explain me what he did and why. And these moments were just incredible and so happy. Sometimes I loved his joy, like, I've been trying this and I've been doing that, and what do you think of this? And that was fascinating. And then everything was starting, the hair, the makeup, the little hands finishing some garments. And then the pressure would increase and increase and increase until the climax, which lasted 15 minutes. We're really in the wild 15 minutes. Mm. When you think that, and I would do maybe 10 rolls of films, which is 350 pictures in 15 minutes. And then it was really going down. And all the shows, somebody would come to me asking me, so Aaron, are you happy? Did you take some good pictures? And like a ghost, I would reply in a low voice, I don't know. And I had no memory of the pictures I'd been taken. It was really like a trance, so intense by all means. It was a journey. It was a very short journey each time.
That is really just spectacular to hear. And I think for our audience is kind of illustrating what it's like behind the scenes. There's a before, there's a during, and there's an after. It's so beautiful to hear you sort of describe the during part, because we've heard a lot about the before and then what comes after. I thought maybe we could shift into some questions around the news of Sarah Burton. At the time that we're recording this, it wasn't too long ago that the news media had announced that Sarah Burton will be ending her era as a creative director of the House of McQueen. And so I thought it might be timely to talk about this for a moment. And I wondered if you would have any thoughts that you'd like to share about this moment in time.
Yes, Sarah. Oh, wow. I met Sarah in late 96, like me. She's always been a very elegant and discreet person, so I was very attracted to her. Kind of quiet, a bit shy person too. So we get along really well from the very beginning. So Sarah leaving McQueen, to me, it really sounds like the end of an era. And she's been the keeper of the temple, if I can say so. Which is obvious, but I'm so happy to say it, is that I think she has done an incredible job. Absolutely amazing how she managed to keep the DNA of the house and the essence of Lee's work and to make it her own work at the same time. I think that's spectacular. So thank you, Sarah, for doing that, because honestly, if they had chosen somebody else in 2010, who knows what would be McQueen today. So she spent 26 years of her life. It's funny because number 13 has been following me. So I'm like, okay, I spent 13 years with Lee and Sarah stopped 13 years after taking the job. She's such a clever and wise person. If that's her decision, I'm sure that's the right decision. I can't wait to see the show tomorrow. I'm going to see it, of course. I think it's another process. It's life, it's organic. I want to believe that the big bosses are wise enough to pick the right person after Sarah. That's not an easy task. But yes, it's a strong house now. When Lee passed away, it was still a young house. It was only 10, 12 years. It's very little for a fashion or couture house. Now it's been in the landscape for a while. It's solid. It's doing well. So she's leaving a wonderful gift to the person after her. And Sarah, I wanted also to quote a tiny anecdote. When I published a book about a project called 24 Hours in a Man's Life, it's a very spiritual book. I've been filming and photographing for 24 hours on a beach on a full moon night with a dancer, and it was closer to theater than dance. And each hour was associated to a human feeling, from joy to despair to worry to exhaustion. So he was reinterpreting the same gesture, but according to the feeling of the hour. And Sarah loved this work. So when I published the book, she wrote just one sentence, and she said, "There is beauty, strength, and fragility in everything Anne is doing." And actually, because I've been thinking a lot about Sarah and Lee lately, I thought I could say exactly the same thing about Sarah. I think in every silhouette she created, there is so much strength, and she is, as Lee, so attached to strong woman with personality. You always have this aspect of protection in Sarah's clothes, like in Lee's clothes. Like, it's not an armor, but it's strong. It's not only vapors. There is a volume. It's like a sculpture around the body, around the personality also of the woman who is wearing it. So, yes, I think she delivered incredible beauty and strength and fragility. And as a woman, I surely can relate to that.
Mm-hmm. We have a saying in my family, in my home. We say, all good things must come to an end. And when we were raising our son and he had to leave the candy store or whatever, we said, son, all good things must come to an end. It was really to impress upon him that there's something good waiting after this, but let's appreciate what the beauty was in this moment, and that it can't always last forever, and that's okay.
It's a living process. It's really like life. And I used to say all the time to my son, he's 25 now, I always said, if you're sad to leave after holidays or something, it's like the candy store. I said, if you're sad to leave, it's because you've been happy. So that's all right. If you weren't sad to leave, that wouldn't be a good sign. And I think he embraces that now.
Well, what do you think is relevant about the work in Rendez-Vous today? We've talked a lot about reflecting, and 13 years have passed since Lee McQueen passed. And so I'm wondering, what is it that you see in the exhibition that resonates today?
I think today things are more ephemeral than ever. We're all aware of this insane flow of information, videos, photos. Like, it's too much. It's like, give me a pause, give me the time to process things, to appreciate things. It's really this uninterrupted flow of information, and you don't remember a lot of things because not all of these information are relevant or interesting enough, sadly. And I'm saying all this because I don't know who said that, an artwork is what resists to time. I truly believe that. The temporality has no impact. Like, I've been in Paris seeing this exhibition about the painter Nicolas de Stael, and it couldn't be more striking. And the last paintings were done in 1950. And to me, Lee McQueen, it's really that kind of level. It's another level. What he had created is so rich and powerful and evocative. It doesn't fade. I mean, how many people has been watching these videos of the McQueen performance or show, whatever, and they are struck by it, just a video on YouTube or something. And it doesn't fade. I mean, we were talking about the show number 19. I can watch it tomorrow and it's still as powerful as it was. So I think Lee has reached this point where his work is still relevant. His vision of woman was, it was years before Me Too, and he talked a lot about empowering women, protecting women, the sad things he had knew in his personal life, seeing her sister being beaten and all this. Nothing is dated in McQueen when I think about it. And also, I've always been convinced that, when you hear people preparing a book, an exhibition, whatever, and sometimes they say these things and I disagree. They say, oh, the public won't understand, or the audience won't get it. I never underestimate the audience, whatever I do, because the audience is very brilliant and very receptive and perfectly able to understand many things and to see things if they are correctly presented. So I think it's always a mistake to put things at a lower level, saying our audience won't get it. People get things. I experienced it with another exhibition about Lee McQueen, which was called The Unfinished, and it was in a photography festival, a famous one in Arles in 2018. People would talk to me and they were crying. They would have these strange words like, I've been touched for the rest of my life. I have this feeling which is unbelievable. I have the feeling of his presence. The feeling of his presence. I felt that many times. And for me, it's the same with Rendez-Vous. It's not a detail. It's very powerful and it grabs you. And I trust the audience. I do believe in the audience to understand what we've been doing and to receive this homage, because it's a homage. It really is. It's a celebration. The exhibition is like an act of communion. Communion, you can say that, reunion, meaning I talked about Suzanne and all the BBP team and Lee McQueen and myself and the audience. And people understand and feel. It's Maya Angelou who said people will forget what you said, we forget this and that, but people won't forget how you made them feel. And that's super important. And I think you can feel a lot of things in Rendez-Vous, which is great because, again, my duty is about transmission. So if people feel something, they will talk about it. They will recommend to people. It's really a human chain. So it's relevant and it's a gift. And I trust people to receive, giving and receiving, to receive this gift. Thanks to your museum.
I think that is really a beautiful place to sort of close that part of the conversation. I think that's just a really poignant, beautiful moment. And I really think the next questions kind of get me into circling back around to you and sort of thinking about your practice now and where you're heading. So for our audiences, I think it would be great to hear a little bit more about how your work and your career are growing. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what projects you're currently working on and where do you see yourself creatively heading in the future?
I try to find balance between different mediums, meaning when I started the compositions, a lot of people say, oh, you're done with photography. The answer is absolutely not. And compositions take a lot of time, and sometimes I miss photography. So I try to organize my time and my projects like full sessions about compositions and then full sessions about photography. For instance, in the upcoming weeks, there is this exhibition at your museum, which is about my photography work. Then I work for Paris Opera with Thierry Kilian, who is a genius to me, friend, great choreographer. That will be fantastic. And I'm working finally on one of these body of work in my photography, which is ballet and dance. So I've done the dummy of the book. It represents 20 years of material. So let me tell you, it's just immense. Instead of digging day after day in my archives, I decided to take it the opposite way. I thought, what is essential? We were talking about Lee and what has to be transmitted. I did the same for ballet. I'm like, okay, I've photographed so many ballet and dancers now. If I just have 2 days or 2 hours to decide what has to be transmitted. So I'm working on this, the book and the exhibition about the art of dance, of movement, of ballet. I keep doing portraits. I still have some portraits to do. And sooner or later, maybe not 24, but 25, I hope I would do the volume 2 of the eyes shut portraits. I did it last year. In 2022, the first volume of portraits of artists with the eyes closed. I've been doing that for 20 years. I ask to any kind of artist, famous or not. I don't want it to be a celebrity book. It's something else. As long as I received an emotion, I offer to make a portrait with the eyes closed. So it's very much about inside journey, dreams, inspiration, and trust more than ever. They close their eyes and they let me do what I want. And it's very peaceful, very beautiful. So the first volume, you had 70 artists, and I already have the material for the volume 2, and I keep doing these portraits. And also I'm preparing, and that's major to me. I've been exhibiting already compositions, the collage. So that's where I am. And at some point, I will need to film again with the camera. I miss that. But I just have 24 hours a day, so...
I know you're incredibly busy. Henri, I just want to thank you so much for speaking with us today. I have truly enjoyed this conversation, and I do hope our audiences have been deeply inspired by your words and your lived experiences and your creative practice. Before we officially close, is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know?
Yes. There are two things I would like to say. I would like to say it's a global thought about the exhibition Rendez-Vous, and I will leave it as simple as that. I think it's a project about hope. I think we're all in charge of our lives and our choices, and we can always make a good decision and have no regret and stand by our lives, and it feels good. And I do hope that seeing what Lee McQueen has accomplished in so little time will be like a lesson in life. Like, as I said, nothing is impossible, and I hope it brings light and joy and hope for every visitor. Life is short, as we all know, and it's important to go where it feels good. It seems simple, but it's not. One of the most beautiful words I heard about what I'm doing, it was about a composition. Somebody came to me on an opening night and said, "Oh, it's so uplifting." And to me, that was the most wonderful compliment I ever heard. And I keep that in mind. I always try in everything I'm doing to give the possibility of an elevation. And I'm not at all comparing myself to Lee McQueen, but Lee did the same thing. He gave this possibility of an elevation, so I hope everybody can catch it. That's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing, it's difficult for me to say it, and I had a few thoughts, but I thought it would be great to share. It refers to Lee's funeral, which was private. But I think there is prescription and time has been passing. It's still very difficult to tell that, but it's a positive message. So, and it's important for his memory and his legacy, and this is so important to me. At his funeral, there was a song that was played because he asked that, and the song is called "Remember Me" by Diana Ross, and it says a lot, so I just wanted to finish by reading these lines. So let me take a good breath. Don't let me hear you about you shedding a tear. You're gonna make it. You're gonna make it. Remember me as a sunny day that you once had along the way. Didn't I inspire you a little higher? Remember me as a funny clown that made you laugh when you were down. Didn't I, boy? Didn't I, boy? Remember me as a big balloon at a carnival that ended too soon. Remember me as a breeze of spring. Remember me as a good thing. Voilà.
Henri is an artist and photographer based in Paris, France. From 1997 to 2010, An amassed an impressive archive of 35,000 photographs while working with her close friend and famed designer, Lee Alexander McQueen. You can see a selection of these intimate portraits and behind-the-scenes images in Lee Alexander McQueen and Henri, Rendez-Vous, on view through January 21st at the Columbia Museum of Art. I think this show is significant to me on a personal level because it marks a beginning of a full circle moment that starts to happen. And sometimes you can't predict what's going to come in your life, and you can't predict the choices that you're going to make. And so for me, this show takes me back to a person that I was at 16 years of age when I thought the world was anything and everything in front of me, and I started to make these choices about possibly going into fashion and was actually looking at Lee Alexander McQueen's work as a source of inspiration. I ended up not making the decision to go into fashion, but fast forward almost 3 decades now later, you start to look at your life and reflect a little bit about where you've been, where you've come from, and where you've ended up. And I think for me, what happens is that, just as Henri said, you try not to live with regret, but more so you try to live with respect, and how you can respect yourself for who you are now based on all that you have been before. You've been listening to Binder, a production of the Columbia Museum of Art. Today's episode was hosted by me, Jackie Adams, produced and edited by Drew Barron, with special assistance from Joelle Ryan Cook. To learn more about CMA exhibitions and programs, visit our website, columbiamuseum.org.